Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines.
Someone says, what's the future? Vaughn Coleman.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. What's going on, guys? Hope you're all doing well. Of course, I am here with another episode of Vaughn Coleman Presents. And before we get started, I want to point out that my books, they are downstairs, of course. I've been a long day, but my books are printed and they are being shipped out currently. If you missed the chance to back my comic book, Phenomenova, let me tell you all about it. It is set 20 years after World War III and follows the idealistic son of a war hero who strikes out to become a superhero inspired by his father's legacy. I just put the link in the chat. You can also find the link to the mailing list on my link tree down below. And we are currently developing the website, and issue 2 is done being colored. So a lot of great stuff, tons of great stuff coming. We have over 700 people on the mailing list, so make sure you're signed up because we will notify you when it's available on the website. It will also be coming to globalcomics.com. So, yeah. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest today, Rich Stahnke. How's it going?
It's good. How about you?
Doing well, man. Doing very well. So I wanted to get into this. So obviously we talked at Heroes Con last 2 years. It's been a long time coming, you coming on the show. So before we get started, I always like to ask, what got you into comics?
That's a good question. And, it's a pretty common question. I don't have a good answer for it. I've been reading comics since I was like 4 years old. I have a real clear memory of walking around my house when I was that age, carrying around this particular comic book. And I held on to that issue for years. The cover was ripped off of it, and it was a Marvel comic book. It was a Western. It reprinted old Western stories. And I held on to it for several years with no cover on it. And I remember it had a publishing date of around mid-1974. And so my collecting goes back that far. My readership goes back that far. And just a couple of years ago, I was able to figure out what book that was. All I remembered was the front page of it because the cover had been missing since I was too young to hardly read. But I was able to figure out what book it was and replaced it a couple of years ago. So I have it back in my collection, which is awesome. But yeah, I don't know
who was the name of the book. I'm just curious. Let me pull it up.
It's got the Two Gun Kid in it is the primary character. It's in a box right behind me. I should have pulled it out because everybody asked that question, and I should have it on hand to show it to you. It's like a mighty Marvel Western. And like I said, it was all reprint of old Western stories.
Oh, old Western. Got it.
Yeah. But yeah, I found it on a random website that was running a sale, and I got it for like 75 cents, and it's in great shape.
75 cents? That's it?
Yeah, it was, it's not a particularly valuable comic because it's just reprints, but I was happy as hell to find it to begin with and figure out what it was, but then I got it for so cheap. It was awesome.
That's always
I don't know who first introduced comics to the house. I mean, my brother always read comic books as well. I have an older brother. So I don't know if he, wanted to get into comics or somebody bought him a couple and then, I was mimicking what he was doing because he was the older brother. I don't know, but I mean, from before I could read, I had comics and was reading comics. And, I think the pictures and everything helped me learn to read, the mirroring or the combination of the pictures, the words together helped me, piece out what people were saying, what was going on. So I, ever since then, I've been reading comics.
That's awesome. That's all right. So you're into that. You're doing comics, and you were into what got you to start making comics? Like, what got you to start?
Well, I mean, I've always had an artistic bend to me, I guess. It was, and you're a young man. What are you, 12?
Yeah, about
so
25.
Yeah. So growing up, obviously this is pre-internet, and where I lived, I got 3 channels on the TV. Didn't even get cable TV when I was growing up. No internet, so you had to amuse yourselves. So if I had paper and some markers or a pencil, pen, whatever, I was drawing, and that was one of the things we did to help pass the time around the house. But I always showed an inclination to it. And with the fascination of comics, it was pretty common for me to draw Spider-Man, Batman, stuff like that, And I never really gave it up. I wrote and drew my own comic book when I was in elementary school. It did get kind of pushed to the side when I was in college. I did a couple of comic strips for the school newspaper while I was in college. And then, you get distracted by doing other stuff when you're in school. So the artwork got pushed to the side. And then when I graduated, I moved here to the Charlotte area and I started tinkering with it again. Image Comics had exploded onto the scene and was super popular. And I was pretty interested in those books. It was very dynamic artwork. It was different than what, you normally saw at Marvel and DC. They're really groundbreaking things. So I was drawing a bunch of pinups and stuff of the Image characters, and I, started again writing my own comic that I was trying to develop, and I sent off some submission samples in the 90s to small press comic book companies. Got a little bit of interest, but I never really got anything published. And so again, I just sort of did it for my own amusement for a few years, and then 2004, I started publishing the Furious Fist of the Drunken Monkey comic. I self-published that basically and got it into Diamond and distributed it. And so I've done the Drunken Monkey book for the last 20 years, but quite often it's basically a side thing I did to amuse myself more or less. So I'd get out an issue like every couple of years. After I got the first run of books out, I thought I was done with the Drunken Monkey for a while. Thought the story had gotten to a point where it was a nice stopping point, what I'd written the last time it was published and distributed through Diamond. And then I just kind of set it aside, and then I revisited it a few years later, and just every once in a while I put an issue of that out. But what I've really been doing lately is I retired almost 3 years ago. And since I was no longer working full time, I really started to hustle with trying to get more work out to the public and do stuff other than just for myself. So I was lucky enough to work with Andy Smith, who I colored that he drew that ran in Heavy Metal magazine.
Oh, I didn't know that. You colored
it? Yeah. Writer was Keith Champagne, whose name's going to come up a lot tonight. Mm-hmm. That's how I got introduced to Keith. So Keith was the writer. He and Andy were developing this story for Heavy Metal magazine. I stopped by Andy's house. He lives here in the Charlotte area too. And we've known each other through the comic world for, 15, 20 years. I popped by his house for something unrelated, and he told me that he was working on this thing with Keith for Heavy Metal, but he needed a colorist. And I was like, well, I'll color it for you. You're telling me it's already sold to Heavy Metal. I'll color it. And Andy, God bless him, was like, yeah, Rich, I don't really know if you can color or not. He's straightforward when he's like, I've never really seen your colors. So I did a couple of sample pages, sent it to Andy. Andy showed it to Keith. Keith said, yeah, heck yeah, bring him on board. So I got the color. It was called Cuda, and it ran in Heavy Metal for 2 issues back in, I guess it was 2021, summer 2021. And from that's how I met Keith. So Keith was writer on that story. And I started doing some stuff for Keith. He started throwing me some other color work here and there. I did some cover colors for other books that he was putting out. And in between there, I also got some other stuff published. Antarctic Press has been really good to me. They've used a lot of my artwork on covers for their books, for their anthology books like Jungle Comics and Planet Comics. And I've had some pinups in their books. And from that, like I said, it just led to more and more work with Keith. And that's how we ended up working together and creating the new book that we're going to talk about.
That's awesome. So you've got a lot of issues under your belt from what I saw, at the con. So you've been keeping this. So I want to ask about the drunken monkey character. So,
Okay.
how did you come up with that?
That was I think I approach that the way I approach a lot of stuff. I sort of retro engineer stuff, and I don't know how you do it when you're working on like your book. I came up with the title of the book first. I think I'd been watching Hong Kong kung fu movies from the 70s and 60s or whatever or something. I was on a kick of that for a while, and a lot of them have that cool kind of drunken master in the title and fist of this and whatever. And so the title hit me first, and then I backward engineered a book to fit the title. So, but I don't know anything about martial arts, so it's not a kung fu book. It's Drunken Monkey is literally about a chimpanzee who has a drinking problem. He's an alcoholic chimp, and he fights crime. So yeah, that's the first issue. The big picture there. That's the first issue that was released through Silent Devil back in 2006, I think. That was my second #1 issue. I'd released a couple of earlier issues. I'm pointing at my screen like you can see what the hell I'm pointing at over here. I'm pointing at my monitor. Up there in the upper left, yeah, that second one there. That's the first issue that I actually put out.
Gotcha.
With a company called Imperium. So I did a couple issues with them in black and white. Like I said, it's an alcoholic chimp who fights crime. And it started out really very much a parody book. His origin and how he comes to possess the glove, his power glove, is a straight homage to the Green Lantern origin. He finds an alien spaceship crashes in front of him. The pilot's all torn up, and he's got a power ring. And Chip, the main character, just basically steals it off his hand because he thinks it's valuable. He's not taking it to be a altruistic motive. He's taking it to go pawn it and get money to go drinking with. So I released a couple of black and white issues with Imperium, and Devil put out a bunch of books in the early 2000s and having some success. And they, the Baronet brothers said, well, if you want to bring your book over here, we'll publish it in color. And I was like, well, heck yeah, that sounds good to me. Because like I said, the first couple issues were black and white, and I was paying for the printing on those early issues. So Silent Devil started paying for printing, and they, wanted to go color with it. So I was like, yeah. So we did another new #1. And then it released 3 issues with Silent Devil. And like I said, at the end of that story arc, I thought I was kind of done with the character. So I kind of shelved it and got distracted by doing some other stuff. I worked on trying to put together a horror anthology book called When Drive-Ins Attack, and got 4 issues of that together and released that. But yeah, Drunken Monkey is, I guess my first love. I feel like the book's matured a little bit from being just a straight parody. I mean, it's still a comedy book, but it's not just every issue trying to parody something that I've seen in another comic. It's got its own characters and subplots and storylines now, and it's been dragging out, 20 years. But I mean, I've put together, I don't know, I think 10 issues. This is the most recent one.
Yeah. Oh, I recognize that a Daredevil homage.
Yeah, that's the first Elektra.
Oh yeah, 168. Yep. Yeah, I noticed you do all these homages. I like them.
Yeah, the that first Silent Devil issue that you first popped up there, that one.
Yeah.
A lot of people looked at it and said, "Oh, that's a Star Wars poster homage," which I didn't intend when I did it. Wasn't thinking that, but once they started pointing it out to me, I saw it. So I was like, "Okay, well, let me run with that." So the second issue. That one there. That's the Wolverine Origins homage. The third issue was Spider-Man 150, Spider-Man 50, which was the first Kingpin.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's that issue. So every issue since then has been an homage cover. So it's become a tradition on the book I try to make it fit what's in the content of my book, not just a random picture.
Right. Yeah, I prefer that.
Yeah. So that's become sort of the trademark of the series. But I'm trying to make more of an effort to get more of those out more frequently now. I've got more time on my hands. So,
oh man, it's a lot of work. Like even then, I'm like hoping to have issue 2 just turned around and sent to people right after, and it's a lot of work creating a comic. It's a ton.
Yeah, you know as well as anybody, right? And man. For me, I do everything. So I write it, draw it, ink it, color it.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. So it takes a little bit of time. And that's one reason I didn't get more issues out over the years is, I'm married, and my daughter is now full grown. I think she's the same age as you. Did you say you were 25?
25.
Yeah, my daughter just turned 25, so she's out of the house now. But for several years, obviously, I was being a parent, a husband. You got to do stuff around the house and working full time. I would just get around to doing an issue when I got around to doing an issue.
Mm-hmm.
But now I've got time on my hands, so I'm trying to do more comic book work with other people. But I'm also going to be pushing more Drunken Monkey books out to the public, hopefully very soon here. But that has to come after we deal with Punch and other books with my new bestie, Keith Champagne.
That's awesome. So I have a question before we get into Punch. Where's the best place? Can you get all your previous work on this campaign?
No.
Where's the best place to get your previous work?
That's a really good question. eBay. I don't have a website. I don't have a specific outlet to point people to. I'm trying to find a new home for digital downloads or for print on demand.
All right. Well, digital, I don't know about digital downloads, but I know Global Comics is where I'm going for digital stuff. They're great.
Okay. Have you already set your page up with them or whatever?
I'm about to. I'm going to work on creating the digital version of issue 1 of my comic. And then from there, see what I can do.
Do they not just require like a PDF or something?
Do they require a PDF? But then you can also do stuff with it. But my book is shipping out to backers, so I'm going to work on it, and then hopefully by the time I'm ready to set that up, I could just drop it.
Okay, well, yeah, I think you'd already have enough files ready to go to sort of make that happen pretty quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so Global Comics, I'll have to look at that. So yeah, there's not an easy place, but for old hard copies, if you don't find me at a show, you can pick them up from me directly. But I know my stuff is out there on eBay. It's mycomicshop.com has most of them in stock. That's Lone Star Comics out of Texas. That's their website. They've got a huge selection of stuff, and I'm pretty sure they've got most of my stuff. And you can pick it up cheap.
Gotcha. Well, let's go ahead and check out your latest. But before we do that, I want to ask, so is this in any way tied to your previous work with Drunken Monkey?
No, not officially. See, okay, so this is coming out. This was co-created with the writer Keith Champagne, who's done a lot of work with DC. He's recently written one of the Stranger Things comics for Dark Horse. He inked the He-Man series that was just out recently. So Keith and I created this together, and it's coming out through his imprint of New Pain Productions, which is something he started with the artist Tom Nguyen, who's also done a lot of work at DC. So they started this together when they put out a book a few years ago called The Switch. And so this is out through Keith's imprint. And right now it's not officially tied in with Drunken Monkey, but Keith and I are talking about introducing the Drunken Monkey into or bringing it under the New Pain umbrella. And if we do, we'll start to sort of integrate his history into some of these other characters. In that issue I showed you of Drunken Monkey with the Electro homage, there's a little mention in there, there's a little Easter egg that hints that a character in that book, has had some interaction with the Punch program that's featured in this book with these animal characters. So it might come around in the future, but right now it's a no, but it's a soft no.
All right.
If that was confusing enough.
No, I don't think so. So let's go ahead and play that trailer, and then we'll talk about the campaign.
Okay.
In a world where neurodiverse, genetically engineered animals hunt, fight, and kill cryptozoological creatures, there exists a team that can only be called Punch. From writer Keith Champagne and artist Rich Stahnke. A brand new title from New Pain Productions. Punch! Bitches.
That was not planned that those were the two images I used for the thumbnail. That's funny. All right, let me go ahead and pull it up. The campaign again. I have to always do it. Another tab on here.
Okay.
So there we go. We got right here. We got Punch #1. So tell everyone about this story.
Okay, so this came about. Keith, the writer, was doing an interview a few months ago, I guess probably around the end of last year. And the people that he was talking to were really doing a deep dive with him about work he had done with Dynamite Comics for radioactive adolescent black belt hamsters.
Yes, I've heard of it.
Yeah. So he wrote that, and Tom Nguyen was the artist on it. They really did a deep dive on that, and I didn't realize Keith had been involved in that. That was sort of the relaunch of that title, because that was one of those things that had come out in the 80s in the wake of the Turtles craze in the mid 80s. When everybody was putting out a book with, an animal team and they were playing on those themes. So I either texted, called, I don't remember if I texted him, emailed him, what I said, Keith, do you want to revisit that? Because it had been a few years since that book had come out. I said, do you want to put together a pitch, and do it again or do a sequel? And he's like, no, why don't we just make our own? Instead of revisiting that, why don't we create something in that vein? And so that immediately in my mind started racing. The little hamster wheels started turning, and they didn't stop for 3 days straight. I was coming up with acronyms and names for the book, and we started bouncing back and forth. What kind of animals? We knew it was going to be an animal team, and that's about all we had to start with. We knew it was going to be some sort of, in that vein of the Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I was like, how about lemurs? Lemurs are cute, and everybody loves lemurs. And he's like, well, I was thinking cats and kittens. And I was like, well, what about otters? Otters are cute, and everybody loves otters, and otters are cool. They
you couldn't decide on an animal.
Yeah. So, we're back and forth with what kind of animals, and, I'm throwing all kinds of acronyms and book names at him, and he's coming back with some stuff. And so at one point, we're like, okay, all these other previous books had been a team of turtles, a team of hamsters, a team of mice, a team of penguins, or whatever it was. It was always the same, animal. So we're like, well, screw that. We're just going to have a bunch of different animals. We're going to have a whole menagerie of animals on the team. So, he got his cat into the team like he wanted. I got the lemur in there and the otter. And then he came up with the other characters. He says every book he is involved in, and it's true based on what I can see, is every book Keith writes has some sort of ape or chimpanzee in it. So there's a chimpanzee on the team. That's the upper left corner there is Crackers. That's the chimpanzee on the team. And then beside her is the otter, and that's Apple. And Apple is big and bulky, but Apple's a female. And you've got Chestnut in the middle, the squirrel there. Mm-hmm. Got the lemur on the team, that's Flapjack. And then the bottom right is a German Shepherd Shark hybrid named Kibble or Sushi, depending on what personality is dominant at the time. Mm. So part of the title that we settled on was Punch. And we went back and forth on what the acronym would actually stand for, but it's pubescent, undercover, neurodiverse, cryptid hunters. So,
gotcha.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, that's cool. Yeah, I was wondering, which came first, the acronym or the, okay.
Yeah, so we did get the acronym settled pretty good, or pretty early. And then, like I said, we went back and forth on what kind of animals, and we finally figured out, it needed to be just a variety. But, Keith, I think, had the idea first to make the main sort of focus of the book being that they're out there hunting cryptozoological creatures. And if anybody's watching who doesn't recognize that term or is unfamiliar, it means things like Bigfoot, the Jersey Devil, the Loch Ness Monster, and we've got aliens in here, the Chupacabra and stuff like that. So that's the cryptid hunter, is sort of what their purpose as a team is. And I don't remember what the N stood for originally when we came up with the acronym, but I pitched them with the neurodiverse, changing it to that. So the other hook of the book is that all the team members have something that they're dealing with. So the chimpanzee up there is sort of on the autism spectrum and is very socially awkward. Apple suffers from depression. That's the otter character. Chestnut has OCD. That's the squirrel. Flapjack, I'm not really sure what exactly his problem is going to be. He does have Tourette's, and that might be all he's dealing with, but there's some other stuff usually going on with all the characters. And then the German Shepherd shark hybrid is a split personality. So the shark has one personality, that's Sushi, and the dog has another personality, that's Kibble. And then the last remaining member of the team is the cat, and that's Marshmallow. And Marshmallow has sort of anger control, rage issues. And he's sort of the Wolverine stand-in for the team.
And then I see you have your Cyclops too.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot of stuff in here that are sort of Easter eggs to the 80s when Keith and I grew up.
Yeah.
Some of it, honestly, you may not even recognize. Like, the guy with all the chains and gold chains around his neck is very much an homage to Mr. T.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. T was huge.
I've seen Rocky 3.
Well, okay, yeah. So there you go. And you probably saw him in a Skechers commercial lately. That's about all I've seen him in the last 20 years. But Mr. T, was a big deal in the 80s. So, he had the mohawk, just like our lemur character, and the chains and everything. So there's a bunch of little Easter egg type things in there. If you like the X-Men, there's sort of little nods to the X-Men in there, like the guy with the visor and our cat character with claws. Mm-hmm. And then there's, mix that in with, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles type approach to the book. And that's the amalgam that you get. And it's full of juvenile humor. Mm-hmm. It's, I don't know if you had a chance to read the preview. I think I sent it to you. But
I wasn't able to yet. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I mean, but the whole thing is there's nothing in here really taken seriously.
Right.
And if anybody, watches this and decides to check out the Kickstarter campaign, there's previews of some of the pages. You'll see some of the general tone of the book. The little character introduction thing there with their little heads shots gives you a snapshot of their personalities, as they introduce themselves.
Gotcha. That's fun. So it seems like you come with the characters first and the rest later.
Yeah, we came up with sort of what we wanted in the team. And then I threw a bunch of stuff at Keith when we were trying to develop this. Like at one point I said, I want them all to be wearing, the luchador wrestling masks. And he's like, okay. Keith is very easy to work with. If I threw a weird idea out at him, he's like, yeah, okay, well, he'd integrate it or whatever. And then I went back and said, no, that doesn't make any sense. They don't really have secret identity, so why are they all wearing masks? So I scrapped that idea and went, okay, but hold up, but I want one of the characters to be wearing a mask, and here's why. And God bless Keith, he took all these weird ideas that I kept throwing at him, and he worked it into something that's cohesive in a script that makes sense. And he just took it off and went running with it. And he takes a very organic approach to writing. It seems like it's almost a stream of consciousness. Like he doesn't really necessarily seem to know where it's going to end up at the end. He just keeps going. And so I didn't know until like I got the script pages in chunks usually. No. I wouldn't know what was coming next. He didn't sit me down and say, okay, in the first issue, we're going to end up here. I didn't know until I got the script and saw the last page. And I was like, oh, wow, holy cow, this is, where he took it at.
That's interesting.
Keith's a big fan of the twist ending too, or surprise ending.
Okay, so we can expect that. That's cool. So it sounds like he has a very distinct writing style. Did you know it was going to be 55 pages going in, or did you?
No, actually we.
50. My bad.
No, it was originally going to be 4 issues. Kind of the standard 24-page issues, And I knocked out the first issue, and that was actually ready back before Heroes Con. We had like preview copies at Heroes Con last June. And then we decided to put issue 1 and what would have been issue 2 together and make it just a double-sized first issue.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you're getting 48 pages of story, and then there's going to be a couple of extra bonus pages, a couple of pinups, and some extra stuff in there to probably round. I imagine it's going to be 52 pages by the time we get done with the campaign.
Gotcha. So how far along are you then into the book?
The book is 99% done.
Mm-hmm.
And literally the only thing left to do is the very last page of the book, page 48 of the story, has to be colored. And I'll be working on that tomorrow. Okay. So as of tomorrow afternoon, this book will be 100% done. All the lettering is done. It's been completely drawn. And like I said, I'm just wrapping up the very last page of coloring tomorrow, and we're done. And if anybody follows any new paint production campaigns and Keith's work, he likes to have his stuff either 100% done or like 90% done before the campaign ever kicks off. That way, if you run into unexpected delays dealing with a printer issue or there's a problem with shipping later on, make sure you can get it into people's hands as fast as possible. I'm sure the backers appreciate that. I've backed other campaigns, and you sit around waiting 2 or 3 months, and it's like, well, where's that damn book at?
Yeah, I always try and update people as much as I can.
So if anybody backs this, it'll be going to the printer within a week of closing the campaign.
Nice.
It's a matter of shipping and then having them do the fulfillment.
That's awesome, man. That's a great to hear, And I know how much work it must be to really get this out in such a timely manner. So let's talk about the goals. If we could get to 2,000 soon. So, that sounds reasonable. And this is a cheap book, by the way. Only $10 for the PDF, $20 for the main. We got 20 for each cover. Of course, that's I recognize that homage right away.
Yeah, that's done by a guy named Rich Miller, who was Keith's roommate at the Kubert School 30 years ago.
Oh, he's a QB?
Yeah.
Awesome. I know. So we got the pinup is added inside of the book? Yeah,
the pinups will be, that's how we're going to round out those extra pages. We're just more pages, more money, means more pages, more material. Keith likes to add actual material to his books or campaigns instead of like a bookmark or a sticker or whatever. He likes to actually add stuff to the books, give you a little more. And you're right. Our prices, I think, are really good for a double-sized book. Most campaigns might be $15, $20 for your standard size floppy comic. Mm-hmm. But you're going to get a double-sized issue here. If it starts to pick up a little steam and we actually start hitting some of those higher goals, I'm not opposed to drawing new material or, some fresh stuff to make it an even bigger book. So throw me some money. I'll be happy to draw some more pages.
That's awesome. Let's everyone throw him some money. Let's get this book doing well. Let's keep this up. Hopefully this gets some views as we go back. But this book looks great. It looks like it's completely finished. And I'd like to ask, so who are your favorite artists?
Oh gosh. Growing up, being a kid who was, a teenager in the 80s, which was a fantastic time to be a comic book fan.
Oh, don't I know? That's all most of what I read is 80s.
The superstars at that time were, like George Perez and John Byrne. And John Byrne probably had the biggest influence on me of anybody as an artist. Growing up, that was staring at his X-Men issues and his Fantastic Four books and the run that he had on Captain America and the Avengers were both phenomenal. That was the biggest influence on me. And I think I still draw stuff sometimes and I look at the face in particular or how a leg muscle or something is. I'm saying, oh, that's a straight up John Byrne, swipe out of my memory. It influences what I'm doing to this day. In today's market, I'm I guess my tastes have changed a little bit. I'm a really big fan of Lee Weeks.
Lee Weeks is great.
Yeah, he is fantastic and super nice guy also.
Very.
And I also had the pleasure a couple of years ago of sitting next to Ron Garney at Heroes Con, and Ron's work over this shoulder back here. You can't see it very well. Right back there is one of his Daredevil prints. I've got up on the wall back there.
Garney's very good.
Yeah, and Ron Garney's run on Daredevil from, I guess, 3 years ago or so, 4 years ago, is the greatest run on that book in the last 10, 15 years easily. That was a hell of a run. And I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the elements of that book being in the show that's coming out next year. I know they're using the villain Muse in it, which was a great villain. But yeah, so I guess my current artist influences or what I like lately are more of a loose, brushy look like Lee and Ron's work. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, of course, people mention John Byrne all the time. Yeah, I was actually just thinking when you said that, I'm like, I wonder if he's got to be one of the most influential artists ever, not just in terms of his work, but in terms of how many people I've met that say John Byrne inspired me specifically.
Well, I think so. I mean, and it's hard to imagine, anybody and everybody is putting out comic books these days. Now, not everybody is being successful, obviously,
Right.
but it's easier than ever to put your own comic book out. So there's tons of artists out there. There's tons of writers out there. And it might be hard for people today to imagine what it was like in, say, 1982 when you had DC and you had Marvel. And you might find, if you're lucky, maybe you found Eclipse Comics out at a comic book store. But when you went to like the local convenience store, which is where at that time I was buying books, you had to walk in and look through the spinner rack.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't find the independent comic books in the convenience store, the 7-Elevens and whatever. So it was Marvel and DC. So
right.
The artists that you became familiar with was a fairly limited group. So John Byrne was so prolific, around 80 to 82, he had about a year, I think, run on the Avengers, high profile book, fantastic looking stuff. Rubenstein was inking that.
Mm-hmm.
He did maybe 6 or 8 issues of Captain America, again with Rubenstein. Mm-hmm. High profile book, obviously the X-Men. And then once he left the X-Men, he was on the Fantastic Four for about 5 years or so straight.
Yeah.
Could not escape John Byrne's influence. And then, random covers here and there, random shorts, or, he did a handful of Marvel team-up issues, a handful of Marvel 2-in-1s. Everywhere you look, you could find John Byrne. So it was a big influence. And Perez was the same way. He was everywhere.
Perez, oh my God, yeah, he's up there. Those are two that I always speak very highly of too. I finished I have to go back to New Teen Titans. It's been years, but I was going to read through the whole run. But I finished all of the 80s X-Men stuff. So I just finished like Extinction Agenda. So it's like seeing it evolving to the 90s. But man, the 80s had some of the best storytelling ever. 86 alone is just, and I haven't even gotten to everything that came out that year, but that year alone, for Frank Miller alone, it was Dark Knight Returns and Born Again and Elektra Assassin people overlook. And Elektra Assassin started coming out that year. So did Daredevil Love and War. That's like 4 Frank Miller stories that I have right here. Like, that's insane. And then on top of that,
on my bookshelf too, yeah.
On top of that, you have like Mutant Massacre. You had what else came out that year?
Dark Knight came out that year, didn't it?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, Punisher: Circle of Blood came out that year with Mike Zeck. Man, it was such a crazy.
It was a hell of a time, and God bless my mother, because obviously I didn't have a job when I was like 14, 15 years old, but my brother and I somehow we figured out that we could mail order comics because we lived in the middle of nowhere growing up. Mm-hmm. So we started ordering our comics from Westfield Comics up in, I think they're in Wisconsin. They're still in business as far as I know. But they started a mail order service where you got in the mail a list of comics that you like, and it was like in triplicate, and you had to write on it and mark the little boxes and add up what you owed them. And then you put a check with your mailing list in an envelope and you mailed it to them. And then they mailed you your comics the next month. And then when you opened your box, it had the next list that you filled out of what you wanted, and they would pre-order it and send it to you. I mean, in the summertime when the annuals were coming out and specials and they were always crossover events and stuff, we were ordering 30, 40 comic books a month each. And it was, all kinds of DC comics, Marvel comics. And then that's when I really started getting into a lot of independent stuff. Like First Comics was big at the time, Eclipse Comics. I was buying stuff from overseas from like 2000 AD and Eagle from the UK, and Captain Britain magazines from over there, and Warrior magazine, which had, Marvel Man and V for Vendetta's first appearances were over there in Warrior magazine. So I was buying all kinds of stuff, and it was a fantastic time.
That's great. There's so much great stuff on the market, and especially at that time. And now where it's a time where it's independent. There's too much on the market, man. Like right now, this month alone, I was making a list. I can't get everyone I want to get on because my book is coming out. It's a busy month for me, and it's also apparently. Thank God actually that my book was late. Because if I had launched this month or last month, I would be just completely. Now I'm launching in a month where no one wants to launch, December, which is good because. No one wants to do that. But I mean, man, it's the point is there's so much good stuff in the market and we have control over it and it's great.
And I know you successfully, did you do just Indiegogo or did you do 2 campaigns?
Fund My Comic, Kickstarter, Indiegogo.
So you did all, did you run them simultaneously or?
Yes and no. So I started with Fund My Comic and then I launched Indiegogo and Kickstarter on the same day. After So I think I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to launch Fund My Comic and run that for about 30 days. And then I think rolling into the new year, I'm going to do Kickstarter and Indiegogo is my plan.
Okay. Yeah. Now when we wrap up.
And then close all of them out together, or at least Kickstarter. Yeah. Close them all out together is my plan.
Okay. Yeah. I think we're going to do an Indiegogo as well once this is over with on Kickstarter. And we haven't really talked about Fund My Comic yet, but I'm pretty sure we're going to do the Indiegogo. But, I was just going to want you to see if you wanted to weigh in with your opinion. I've been watching a lot of stuff on Kickstarter, and it seems like a lot of campaigns are not doing as well as they used to, or it's been harder. And I don't know if there's a glut of stuff out there.
Oh, on Kickstarter too? Because I know Indiegogo is just hit hard.
Okay.
It seems like it's just a downtrend in comics in general. In indie comics, the crowdfunding scene. So I don't know. Which is why people were saying it was like a miracle. I guess that I did, as well as I did, but I don't know. I mean, it depends because some people you see are still doing great, but then others are really struggling right now.
Well, I mean, there's a very specific market for some people on stuff like Kickstarter. I mean, I know if you put out, a certain type of book and you'll make money if you want to go that route, but I was watching a campaign that just ended recently of a guy I know, and he normally has a lot of backers, and he's usually his campaigns are always successful. And he was trying to do some reprints with new covers of his book, and it did not fund. I mean, he only made about half of what his goal was.
That's crazy.
And I know there's another person I've done some color work with. They have a book on Kickstarter too, and they seem to be struggling. They're only about halfway to their goal at this point. They've got more backers than we have on our campaign, but their goal is a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like they've been selling a lot of PDFs and not physical copies. So everybody's going in at that lower tier. So I worry about in the future, are people going to say, I'm tired of paying $20 for a comic book?
Yeah. Well, I think that's coming up. That's why, we all want to, I think everyone wants to lower their prices if we could all, you know what I mean? So that's the tough part is being the one.
Tough. I mean, for people, Keith is running the campaign. I've got access to the page. I can do some stuff on it. But, I mean, he's really running the campaign, and he's run several in the past. I'm becoming more informed on all those behind-the-scene costs, especially if you want somebody to do the fulfillment for you.
Oh, God.
That's into your profit margin. You have to charge $15 and $20 because after you pay for, print costs, and then there's some shipping usually, and then there's the fees to the platform, and then there's credit card fees, and then there's this and that,
Yeah, I mean, I want to charge, a low amount for my next issue, but I got to make sure that I can do it.
Yeah, because you do want to make some money. You're not, as some people would, as a certain politician was trying to draw attention to recently, price gouging. You're not gouging prices. You're just trying to make a little bit of money. You could run a campaign and do it at cost, basically, and that would lower the cost for your customers. But you get exposure, and for your time and effort put into making the book, there's no return there if you undercut yourself and sell it at a cheap price, which is sad. I mean, I'd love to get it in the hands of 500-600 people at a really low price, but
I think we're going to see a rise of digital right now. I mean, I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to. I wish I could have sold my first book for lower than I did, honestly. But it is what it is. It is. But hopefully, the digital market is going to be there. We'll see. I'd love to make things as cheap as possible because comics already has a low base of customers when you compare it to film, when you compare it to,
oh Lord, yeah.
And then on top of that, they're spending more. It's tough. It's tough all across the board. And I wish I had a better answer, because I'd always be like, how can you charge $25 for a book? And then I start making them and I'm like,
no, that's why. Yeah.
I'm like,
no, I mean, we're lucky on Punch that, it's just me and Keith. I do all the artwork and Keith writes it, obviously, and he also does the lettering. So it's just the two of us. We don't have any outside, contractors. There's nobody we had to hire to work on the book to help get it together. So, I mean, the people who maybe write their own comic but then have to hire an artist and a colorist and a letterer and everybody else, that stuff's not coming cheap,
No.
So making any money at all, it's not much. So I'm sympathetic to it as a creator, but on the other side, as a consumer, it's like, man, that's expensive money for a comic book,
Yeah. I'm on both sides of the fence. I'm like, it's just too much for me right now. Also, I need to buy that. It's there's no easy answer, but I'm hoping that people swing by and pick up your book.
I hope so. I mean, if one or two people jump on board, I'd appreciate it. That'll put us, right at the $2,000 mark, maybe over if somebody picks up one of the bigger tiers. We've got some good rewards. I think we've got some original artwork on there you can pick up. It's pretty cheap. One of the covers, I think the original artwork for that Hulk homage cover by Rich Miller is still available. And, a piece of cover artwork for $350, I think it's going for, or it might be $4. I think it's $350. That's a pretty good deal for a piece of cover art. And, there's a lot of people out there who like the homage covers and those images. So maybe somebody will pick that up. But we also have a retailer tier, and I don't know if you did that on your campaign.
Yeah, I did do it.
If somebody's got a shop and you want to get multiple copies of the book, it's basically half price for the retailer tier.
Yeah, someone picked it up, but they haven't responded to my emails on whether they're a retailer or not. So I'm like, you got to let me know, man. Like,
yeah,
you're not getting, you know what I mean? Like, you're not getting the price if you're not a retailer. So it's that kind of thing.
It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to buy it if you weren't. I mean, unless they just really wanted a lot of copies of your book.
Yeah, a lot. Well, also retailers get a discount because they're selling it. So that might be it. You might be like, haha, you think, no, you're not getting those copies unless you get the special treatment if you prove, because obviously I want it in shops. But
yeah. And down the line, I mean, this book is it's not, there's nothing in it that's explicit. It's not an adult comic book, but it's got strong language in it. It's a PG-13. If it were a movie, it'd be PG-13. Probably, not even rated R. It'd be PG-13. But Keith and I have talked about cleaning up the language a little bit in it, and that's really what drives that PG-13 type of rating. Cleaning up the language in it, and then maybe marketing it to a teen audience as a young adult, publication. Someplace like Paper Cuts or Scholastic might be interested in it. I mean, especially, it's got a potential market with the neurodiverse characters in it. It's got a potential market, or something out there that maybe a little hole in the market that needs to be filled. I personally would love if, a year from now, somebody walks up to me at a show and says, I got this book because I have autism, or I have this condition I've been dealing with, and I really enjoyed the book, and I appreciated the way you did the characters, or whatever. I mean, I'd love for that to happen down the line. So if we put it out through like Scholastic, obviously that greatly increases the marketplace presence for it. So we'll see if that happens. But yeah, I mean, I want to see this in print, and maybe from a traditional publisher down the line too.
Yeah, we'll see. It's always working toward the next thing. Even this, like, I'm inspired. I have ideas. Yeah.
I mean, Punch 2 will be coming out next year. I'm not sure what the time frame is. It'll probably be about this time a year from now. Keith has other ongoing projects that we're working on. I've been the colorist on the first 2 issues of a book he has called The Jump.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Yeah. So that's one of the covers I did for Jump #1. That's Pat Olif artwork on there. So he's got several books in the hopper. Jump #3 is written, and we're waiting on the artist Carlos Reno to come off of a book he's doing with I can't remember the name of the company. He's doing a book for another company. As soon as he's done with that, we'll be doing on Jump #3. And Keith has a mini-series that wrapped up earlier this year called Daybreak. So we'll probably be looking at a collected edition of that coming out next year. So he's got a few things in the works. So the second issue of Punch is coming, but it'll probably be late summer or about this time next year before we do the second issue of that. But once it's out and those 2 issues are done, even if Keith's not interested in it, I'm going to be looking around for a publisher to, either collect it, put it out as one graphic novel, or release it as like a 4-issue miniseries or something. Get it out into comic book stores, which I think is a good model. And I assume you've probably thought of that too. Crowdfund and get your book out in the public a little bit, put a little money back in your pocket from producing it, and then down the line look for other outlets.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And I want to have a catalog too when I'm looking at other options.
Yeah.
And it also helps having like selling it, saying, hey, this book is already a hit before it's even been, it's already got fans, and that's something you got to work on. There's so many options when it comes to crowdfunding and what have you, and the market. So I'm wishing you the best of luck. Anything else you want to say before we head out?
No, I appreciate you having me on. I know we went back and forth trying to get it scheduled and whatever, but I appreciate your time, man.
Of course.
You're busy. You're out there hustling. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. Same. No. Of course. Let me know. And if you need I'll send this to you. I made a list of shows to get on.
Okay.
If you need anything.
I appreciate that. Keith and I made the rounds on some of the live streams and stuff just 2 or 3 months ago when we had Jump #2 on Kickstarter. So we're looking for some fresh places to pop in and maybe talk to an audience that we haven't already worn out our welcome on.
Gotcha. All right. Well, yeah, you never know. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day. And I'm going to play the trailer for Phenomenova as I head out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Of course. Peace out and have a good one.
Thanks, man.
Play the trailer here.
When the whole world was dragged into World War III, brave men like my father fought on the front lines. And they weren't alone. That was 20 years ago. Now it's up to us to carry on their legacy. And every so often, the earth from which we come gives way for something new, something greater to be born, and with them, even greater threats to face. Phenomenova. For you, Dad. For you.